Hi there Waltineers, I'm Jack and this is DSNY Newscast, and today I want to talk about D23. As we're now less than a month away from it taking place on August 9th through August 11th in Anaheim, California, which is where it always takes place every 2 years. And the schedule this year is that on Friday it will be Disney Entertainment Showcase, then on Saturday it will be the Disney Experiences Showcase, and then on Sunday it will be the Disney Legends Ceremony. And what I want to focus in and talk about today is Saturday, August 10th, and that Disney Experiences Showcase, as that's, to you and me, we all know it as the Disney Parks presentation. And I want to give my predictions for the Disney Parks presentation and talk about what's likely to get announced. As, you know, over the past several months, I've heard a lot of rumors about various stuff building up towards D23, and I thought right now would be a great opportunity to do a predictions video ahead of D23. And so where I want to begin is actually talking about the start time for this Disney Parks presentation, as it's actually going to be a later start time than what we've previously had in recent years, as it's going to start at 7 p.m. local time in California, which means for everyone on the east coast of the US, it's going to be a 10 p.m. start time on that Saturday night. And then for my international viewers, my fellow Brits in the UK, it's a 3 a.m. start time. So if you want to set your alarm clocks and wake up and watch along, that's when you have to do it. And I say watch along because I'm assuming there will be a live stream of the presentation. At least they have done so for the last few years, and I haven't seen it announced yet, but I'm assuming there will be. Now, obviously, I'll be covering it all extensively here on this channel, as I have for the last 7 years of doing these kind of events. And I probably won't get much sleep that weekend. I never do. I'm going to be very tired, but I will be covering it all. So I'll be covering the entertainment news as well. I'll be covering that and doing a roundup and a wrap-up of everything in terms of movie and entertainment news. And then on, you know, the Disney Parks side of things, I'll be covering it all in greater depth. So I'll be adding extra context, more details as everything comes out. So if you want to watch the Disney Park presentation, the 2.5 hour presentation, or you want to skip it and just get the recap of everything that you need to know, I'll be covering it all here on this channel as well. Be sure to subscribe down below, hit the notification bell, and come back on August 9th to the 11th, as I'll be covering it all extensively. Now, with that being said, let's talk about the actual presentation itself. And they've announced that it's going to be called Horizons. Now, that's the name, the title for this presentation, and typically these are just generic titles for these presentations. I think last time around in 2022 it was Boundless Future or something like that. So they're just kind of like placeholders to try and just add a generic kind of title for the presentation. Wouldn't read too much into the name, to be honest, but the artwork does show all of the various parks around the world except for Disney Sea within the artwork. So I think they're trying to show that they'll cover everything in this event, and they're going to have something new to offer for every single park around the world. And then the other thing to mention here is that this is going to be taking place slightly differently to previous years, as the show floor at the Anaheim Convention Center is going to have the pavilions like we've come to expect in the daytime, and then the presentations are going to take place at nighttime just down the road at the big arena, the Honda Center, which has a seat capacity of around 17,000 seats, which I think they're going to use around 10 to 12,000 of those seats for these presentations. But nevertheless, that's how it's going to happen for this year's D23. And then for the show floor at the Anaheim Convention Center, they've got pavilions. Now, these are important because there's going to be an Imagineering pavilion, and this year's titled Behind the Dreams. It is important because once they had the parks presentation on the Saturday, as we saw in 2019 and 2017, they dropped a curtain and showed way more projects and stuff like that that they previously just announced at the parks presentation. So on the Sunday, they might drop the curtain and show all new models and maquettes and attraction posters and concept art of the announcements that they made the previous day. So we'll see what happens there, but I'll be covering all of that if and when that happens here on the channel as well, to give more coverage of the projects that get announced. But anyway, with that being said, let's get on with the predictions, as after all, that's what you've come to this video for, and I'm going to go into it in great depth, so buckle up. You know, this is going to be a long video, and I'm going to cover it from Walt Disney World to Disneyland, to Disneyland Paris, to Asian Disney parks, to Disney Cruise Line. I'm going to try and cover it all, so it's going to be a long video, but let's start with Walt Disney World, as it is the biggest resort that Disney has. And where I want to begin is the almost certain category, you know, the area where we'll definitely get more news about, and that is Tropical Americas over at Animal Kingdom, which is the transformation of Dinoland USA and Dinorama into Tropical Americas, you know, which was previously announced last year in September at Destination D23. And this is going to have Encanto as an attraction within the new Tropical Americas land, and an Indiana Jones attraction. Now, from what I've previously heard, the Indiana Jones attraction, it's obviously a re-theme of Dinosaur, is going to not just be a clone of Indiana Jones' adventure over in Disneyland, but it's going to have its own original storyline and unique set elements for Animal Kingdom to make it better fit within Animal Kingdom. And then with the Encanto attraction, there's been lots of discussion about the ride system for this attraction, and some insiders are saying it's a boat ride, some are saying it's an Omni Mover, and some are saying that it's a trackless ride system. So we'll see what gets announced in terms of the ride system for this, but I'm sure we're going to get more concept art, attraction details for the Encanto attraction at Animal Kingdom as well, all announced at D23, so that's almost certain. Another thing that's almost certain is Test Track 3.0, more information, as this is actually currently in the works right now. Construction's underway. This is being funded by Chevrolet and GM as the funding for the pavilion. And this is going to be a revamp of Test Track, which is going to take inspiration from World of Motion. Now, we should get more clarification about that, whether it will get the theme song back from World of Motion, which was fun to be free. You know, that'd be great if we saw that. And we'll get more concept art, hopefully, and see how much of the interior theming will take inspiration from World of Motion's theming, that Epcot Legacy attraction. So definitely going to get more in the way of the Test Track 3.0 project as well, considering that that's the only one that Disney's really in active development about. But the Tropical Americas will also get information about, because, you know, we've seen the Imagineering permit for the trailers, the big hub that they're building at the back of Animal Kingdom for the Imagineers to, you know, have as their hub for all their office space, and they're building this Tropical Americas land within the Dino Land area. So shovels are going to be in the ground fairly soon on Tropical Americas this year, so we'll get more information about Tropical Americas at D23. Then we've got to move on to highly likely. Now, I know it's a bit arbitrary to say, you know, highly likely, very likely, all these different things, but highly likely as well is Beyond Big Thunder. And I say that because within the artwork for the presentation, they did showcase Big Thunder Mountain on the right hand side of the artwork there, along with all the rest of the castle icons. So we're going to get something in the way of Beyond Big Thunder. Now, just how far they want to go in giving us information on Beyond Big Thunder is going to be interesting. Now, from what I've heard, it's going to be a Phase 1 and Phase 2 approach they're going to take, and the rumours that I've heard, at least, it indicates that Phase 1's going to be Coco in terms of an attraction Beyond Big Thunder, and Phase 2 is bit more up in the air at the moment. They haven't quite settled on something. So I don't know if we'll get Phase 2 announced at D23, because obviously that will be built after Phase 1, and they might want to save that for D23 in 2026 to announce it then as a big thing to announce in 2026 instead. Especially as they get closer to it, they can then confirm and settle on what they actually want to do in Phase 2. But Phase 1, from what I've heard and from what some insiders have also heard as well, Coco is the front runner for Beyond Big Thunder at the moment. So fingers crossed we get that announcement at D23 as well. We'll most likely also get some news about Big Thunder Mountain itself in terms of a revamp and you know, enhancements to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Walt Disney World, as there's been a permit that's been filed which seems to indicate that they're going to do a retrack of the roller coaster track and, you know, give it a bit of TLC and make it run more smoothly. And so if that's the case, then we should probably get an announcement of maybe Big Thunder Mountain at Walt Disney World getting the special effects, which we saw at Disneyland and Disneyland Paris as well at D23. So fingers crossed for that. In terms of Phase 2 for Beyond Big Thunder, maybe we'll get a tease of some artwork that's a little bit vague, but I don't know where we'll go with that. You know, there's been rumours from Cars to Zootopia to Villains Kingdom, all being mentioned as potential IP contenders for Phase 2. So we'll see what happens with Beyond Big Thunder. But then we move on to the other thing, which I've heard an awful lot about, which is I keep being told about Moana and how Imagineering isn't quite done with Moana as a ride-through attraction. They want to, bring Moana to the parks in a greater way. And it does make sense. Moana was the #1 streamed movie across all streaming services last year in 2023, and they got Moana 2 in the works as well. Now, this supposedly, from what the insiders on the WDW Magic forums are indicating, it's going to be Beyond Pirates. So that's what I'm kind of calling it, Beyond Big Thunder and Beyond Pirates for Magic Kingdom. And this will be within Adventureland, this attraction. So we'll see if this gets announced. But there has been a patent that was filed recently that Blog Mickey covered, and it was for a new flume ride system that mimics the ocean's waves, and the diagram used in the patent is unmistakably Moana themed in some way. So I think you'll all agree with me on that one. And then back in 2022, Imagineering also filed for another patent which showed a boat motion simulator, and on the projection dome of the simulator it was definitely a Polynesian boat with seemingly Moana and Maui on the vessel. So that is clearly something that Imagineering has been working towards in terms of trying to give Moana a ride-through attraction. And obviously at D23 in 2022 we did see the artwork. That was a water ride for Moana, so fingers crossed we get that announcement for Magic Kingdom as well. I'm not saying that's highly likely, I'm saying it's sort of like likely instead. I know it's a bit arbitrary to say this, but it's a rumour, and the other stuff is almost certain to get announced, whereas this is rumours territory and we don't know how far they're going to go. I just realised that's a pretty bad pun, I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, the next thing is Lion King at Animal Kingdom, and there's been a rumour that a Lion King attraction is going to be announced for Animal Kingdom. Now, this is supposedly titled as Project Sun, and it makes sense because they've got the big Imagineering hub being built at the back of Animal Kingdom. So if they're going to be building more than just Tropical Americas, but also Project Sun with this Lion King attraction, then that makes total sense. Now, this kind of lines up with what we've heard also in terms of a rumour for Disneyland Paris and Walt Disney Studios Park and the massive transformation over there with Disney Adventure World. And supposedly Lion King and the land revolving around the Lion King is being planned for Disneyland Paris. I'll get to that in a little bit, but a Lion King attraction, a ride-through attraction, supposedly it's a boat ride. That's what is being stated by some insiders. Again, Disney seems to be wanting to do a lot of this boat ride stuff because it's high capacity and it's reliable. Supposedly the one in Animal Kingdom is going to be a bit more like Fantasyland style ride in terms of the book report style ride of Lion King. And then the next thing, which is rumoured also, is Magic Kingdom to receive a new parade, a new nighttime parade. Now this is one which is feels like we've been talking about for years, because we have. And recently, Steve, who's the owner of wdwmagic.com, has stated that they've heard that a parade is in the works for Magic Kingdom. So hopefully we'll see this get announced at D23 for Magic Kingdom, and hopefully it'll be next year that it debuts in 2025. But we'll see what happens with that. I'm wondering if it's a kind of a daytime, nighttime transitional parade, a bit like Magic Happens, where it can operate both in daytime and nighttime, because Festival of Fantasy is a little bit long in the tooth as well now. It's over 10 years old, and also I would love to see a new nighttime parade at Magic Kingdom. So whether it will be that kind of thing, personally, I would prefer it to be just a standalone nighttime parade, because I think that would serve it better. But we'll see what they do in terms of this. It's still a rumour at the moment, but we'll see if that gets announced. And then Disney's Hollywood Studios. We're moving more into the heavy rumoured section of the video, I would say, in terms of at least Walt Disney World. I'm not going to say this is likely to happen or anything like that. It's a kind of a 50-50 whether this will get announced or not. But supposedly Animation Courtyard is being earmarked as the next expansion at Hollywood Studios that Disney want to do something at. And it'll be interesting to see if they announce something to be coming to Animation Courtyard, which expands it on out all the way up the back towards Rock and Roller Coaster around there. I personally have gone on record in the past and said I think Villains Kingdom, a Villains Land, indoor Villains Land, would make perfect sense in this location. but Animation Courtyard is being looked at as the expansion. So I don't know what it will be, but the rumor is that Animation Courtyard might get announced as receiving a revamp and an expansion at D23. But we'll see if Disney want to go that far in announcing that project as well. You know, Josh D'Amaro has gone on and on about turbocharging the Disney parks and wanting to outline all this big new capital expenditure for the parks. So we'll see just how far they want to go in terms of announcing these projects. But like I said, what I've heard is that Disney want to move away from the blue sky aspect with this D23, as they know that last time around in 2022, it was met with a very lukewarm response and a lot of skepticism from people. And to be honest, in my opinion, that D23 was extremely underwhelming. So they want to kind of fix things this time around and make sure that what they announce on stage is feasible to be built and they actually begin to actually build it and regain that trust with the fan base. So hopefully they're going to do that. But that's the reason why I'm saying Animation Courtyard. Don't know if they would announce that yet, if they haven't quite settled on exactly what they want to build there. But that is something to keep an eye out on as well. Then the other thing is Inside Out 2. And I bring this up because it's now become Pixar's highest grossing box office for any of their movies in the history of Pixar. And it's eclipsed Incredibles 2 with 1.2 billion, and it's going higher and higher, and we just don't know where this thing's going to stop. It might even eclipse Frozen 2 in terms of Disney's highest grossing animated movie box office. And already, just based off the performance it's already had, when movies like this receive this kind of reaction in terms of box office, money talks in Disney executives' eyes, and clearly they're looking at trying to get Inside Out into the parks in a ride format in some way and have greater representation of Inside Out and these characters within the parks. Now, I think, personally, Wonders of Life Pavilion makes perfect sense for Inside Out. It's just sat there vacant. They've fixed the roof on it, and the Play Pavilion got, sidelined and just went away, fell off the table. And I think if they were to do an Inside Out attraction in the Wonders of Life Pavilion and make it kind of a health pavilion and have both physical and mental health covered within the pavilion, with Baymax talking about the physical health, and then obviously Inside Out's trying to explain good mental health within the attraction. I know it sounds a bit boring, but Epcot is about edutainment after all, and if using these characters, Baymax and Inside Out characters, they can take an educational element and make it fun, interactive and interesting for the general populace to actually enjoy. So I think that is a good move, but we'll see if they want to announce anything in Inside Out. Also, Journey into Imagination. Now, I don't think Inside Out will come to the Imagination Pavilion. I think Figment has proven himself to be too much of a merchandise seller to remove Figment from Epcot. He's the park's icon, the mascot of the park in many ways. And Journey into Imagination, they know if they do a new version of Journey into Imagination, it will be a huge win with the fans. I don't know if they will announce that at this year's D23, since from what I've heard, Imagineering are still trying to work out exactly what to do with Imagination. It's a very difficult needle to thread in a way with this Journey into Imagination redo, but they've taken inspiration from World of Motion with Test Track 3.0, so fingers crossed they will take inspiration from the original Journey into Imagination if they are going to be doing a revamp to Journey into Imagination, which is very much needed. It definitely does need it, but we'll see if that gets announced at D23 as well. Now, next up, I want to talk about Disneyland and move on over to the West Coast. And the first thing which I want to talk about, which is almost certainly going to get more information about, and that is Avatar and the Avatar themed land, as they've already announced it's coming to the Disneyland Resort. But from what I've heard in terms of rumors, and I've already gone on the record and stated, is that it's supposedly coming to Disney California Adventure, and more specifically the Hollywood backlot area in that corner of the park up down there. That's where this Avatar themed land is going to go, supposedly. And we've seen in the artwork already that it's going to be a boat ride of some sort. We can see in that artwork. And from what I've heard, it's going to be using the e-ticket boat ride system from the Shanghai Pirates boat ride over there. in this attraction, and it does kind of line up with what we can see in the artwork. And so hopefully we'll get all of this kind of confirmed in a greater way, get new attraction details, we'll get new concept art of what they've got planned. This whole thing's going to be based around, you know, Way of Water and the future films, so we'll see what they do with this. And the way that this works is it's part of Disneyland Forward in a way, because they're going to expand on out into the bus loop area for Disneyland, and they're going to relocate the bus loop area to the other side of Harbour Boulevard, at least that's what the rumour is, along with the massive parking structure they want to build over there as well, and then have a pedestrian bridge go across to Disneyland, which then opens up a lot more space to expand out to the backlot area over there, the Hollywood backlot, and build out this Avatar themed land. And then the next thing, which is very likely to also get more details on, is the Avengers e-ticket attraction, which it seems like Disney might have forgotten about, but I haven't forgotten about. And we've heard some things along the way. It's been mentioned a few times, but it hasn't really been mentioned in any sort of great depth. And we haven't seen any construction work begin on this yet. But hopefully we get more in terms of the attraction details and more artwork of what this is going to have to do with. We got the announcement that it was the multiverse attraction, so it'll be interesting to hear more about the story details, what the attraction is going to be like. I reckon it's going to be like the Peter Pan Neverland ride that's just opened over at Fantasy Springs in Tokyo. It looks like it's using the same ride system as that, so we'll see what they do with that over there. Then we move on to the heavy rumoured section of this video for the predictions for Disneyland, and it's supposedly even got a project name, and that is Project Kansas. And what this rumour is for a Walt Disney animatronic. Now, to me, it almost sounds too good to be true. I would love to see this happen, but I haven't been able to personally confirm that this, you know, is happening. I've only heard from different sources, second-hand sources. So I've covered it as a standalone video, and I'm covering it again now just to cover my bases, to say that this is something that's been spoken about. But I don't know if it's a game of telephone that's going on, and it's kind of a circular echoed chamber of people just keep telling each other the same rumour. But with this whole thing, there is some smoke where there's fire here, as the Lincoln show, you know, the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, that has had a permit filed for it, and they're going to be installing a new turntable in that attraction, which is where the animatronic Lincoln figure would be on the turntables. They're installing a new turntable there, and the project budget for this is $5 million, which is a lot of money for just a general refurbishment for this attraction. So smoke where there's fire, and if people have been, you know, saying there's Walt Disney animatronic, supposedly it could be going into the Lincoln, you know, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and alternating the shows out. So therefore you've got Walt on one side of the turntable and Abraham Lincoln on the other side, and then you could do the history of Disneyland and then the history of America, and do an alternate show each half an hour. Or they could have Walt Disney introducing Abraham Lincoln, as they did in the TV show. But either way, there is something that's happening here. Now, it could be the case that people have been told Walt Disney's coming to Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and they've assumed it's an animatronic. And when it could actually just be the hologram that we saw for the Disney 100 exhibition. But clearly, the Walt Disney family have given Disney approval to use Walt's likeness in this way for the exhibition, for the Disney 100 traveling exhibition. So maybe they've been given approval for the animatronic. Now, if this is the case, I would love to see this. This is kind of a dream scenario for seeing Walt Disney come back to the parks, in my opinion, in animatronic form. I would love to see this. This would be fantastic. But very much rumour based at the moment. If this is to happen, this would be the big attraction project for Disneyland's 70th next year. So perfect timing for that. We'll see if that happens. Then Disneyland Forward plans. Now, everyone thinks Disneyland Forward is, you know, Disney are going to start expanding out of parks immediately, but it's important to remember that they've been given 28 years to expand into these areas that they've been given approval for. So Disney aren't going to use up all these areas immediately, at least I don't think they are. And I don't think we're going to get any third park announcements for the Disneyland Resort in any great way. So I would say low expectations in terms of Disneyland Forward plans. They might show some more blue sky plans of what they might do next, but, you know, I don't think we're going to get a third park or a third gate. I'm hoping that we get a Tomorrowland announcement as well, as a redo to Tomorrowland. I know Darlin over at Offhand Disney would love to see the People Mover get an announcement for that returning to Tomorrowland. So who knows? Maybe we'll get something like that as well. But I think there's two certainties there, which is the Avatar theme land and Avengers e-ticket attraction, and then the other thing which is heavily rumored, which I think might happen as well, which is the Walt Disney animatronic get announced or showcased at the D23 presentation. And then we come to Disneyland Paris, and I want to talk about predictions for this, as it's kind of interesting, as over the last few D23s, Disneyland Paris does get snubbed from time to time and doesn't really get mentioned. But interestingly, this time around, the president of Disneyland Paris has teased that something big might get announced at this year's D23 for Disneyland Paris. And so I think we do need to start talking about predictions for Disneyland Paris as well. And the most obvious one is the possibility of the announcement of a Lion King land, you know, like a Pride Rock land coming to Walt Disney Studios Park as part of the transformation into Disney Adventure World. As if they are going to do the Lion King attraction in Disney's Animal Kingdom, it makes perfect sense to mention it in the same sort of breath about what they're doing over in Disneyland Paris as well. But, you know, I think those two announcements do hinge upon each other. They both need to get announced kind of together to make it make sense. So we'll see if the Animal Kingdom thing's likely, then the one announcement for Disneyland Paris might get announced as well, with the Lion King thing there as well. But there's going to be a whole land built around Lion King. At least that's what's being considered or being planned at the moment for that expansion, as another expansion around the lake area there. Then the next thing is Space Mountain returning to its original classic form and leaving Hyperspace Mountain behind. Now, as part of this, supposedly it's going to be integrated within the Society of Explorers and Adventurers in terms of the Disney Parks mythology and the storyline, which I think makes perfect sense, as after all, the attraction has got that beautiful Jules Verne aesthetic to the attraction, and it would make perfect sense for it to be integrated within the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. And after all, in the background of a video that Imagineering released, it did actually have like a pin in Disneyland Paris where Space Mountain is for Society of Explorers and Adventures. So maybe there is, you know, a hint there towards that being announced as well. And then the big rumor here, which, you know, I don't necessarily think is going to get announced at this year's D23, but is possible, I will mention it, is a Star Wars themed land to be announced for Disneyland Paris. And when I say that, it's supposedly an expansion to Discoveryland. So we'll be interesting to see what happens there. I have heard that Scott Trowbridge, who is the architect in many ways of Galaxy's Edge at Walt Disney World and Disneyland, with Rise of Resistance and all that sort of stuff, is supposedly working on international projects for Walt Disney Imagineering now. So maybe there's that link there to Star Wars. Maybe there's a Star Wars land coming to Disneyland Paris. Don't know if that will get announced at this year's D23. It's probably a bit further off into the future, but we'll see. I thought it would be worth mentioning, nevertheless, in this video. Then also, in terms of the Asian Disney parks with, you know, Shanghai, Hong Kong and Tokyo, I think we'll get a mention of a new project for each one of those parks, but, you know, not anything great depth there. And in terms of these, I'm expecting the roller coaster that's been commissioned for Shanghai Disneyland to most likely get officially announced. Supposedly it's Marvel themed and it's Spider-Man themed. They've already taken bids for the manufacturer for the roller coaster, and it's got a budget of around $300 million. Half of that's going to be funded by the Chinese government, as they have half ownership of Shanghai Disneyland anyway, so it's not going to use up too much of the $60 billion turbocharging of the Disney parks with the capex there. But interesting to see that happen if that gets announced at D23. New artwork for Space Mountain in Tokyo. Would love to see what this ride system is going to be. I'm very fascinated to see this modern take on Space Mountain, you know, being rebuilt from the ground up in Tokyo Disneyland. So most likely going to get some new artwork and some new attraction details there. And then there's also talk of a Marvel attraction to be built at Hong Kong Disneyland as well. There's apparently additional funds that's been allocated for Hong Kong Disneyland to continue to expand that park past, obviously, what they've just done with the Frozen Land, to continue to expand out the park. And the Marvel attraction is supposedly in the works for that park as well. So we'll see if that gets announced. Don't know if it will, but maybe it will. And then the last thing to talk about is Disney Cruise Line. And got some predictions for this, and obviously we'll get new details for for the third ship in the Wish class fleet of ships, which is known as the Disney Destiny. It was announced early this year, and it'll be setting sail in 2025, and it's themed around heroes and villains. So be interesting to see what we get announced for that, what the bars are on board, what the restaurants are, that kind of detail. And then I'm thinking we'll probably get the announcements of some new ships over the next 5 years, and these will probably end up being more West Coast based in terms of where they'll be serving the itineraries up along that coast. I've heard that a large expansion is in the works for West Coast Disney Cruise Line operations, so that's most likely going to be a big port investment along with some new ships probably as well to serve the West Coast itineraries with the Alaskan cruises and the Hawaiian cruises and stuff like that, and really expand out their operations over there. So that's the Disney Cruise Line section. Now, I think I've covered pretty much everything that I've heard in terms of rumors or seen in terms of rumors over the past several months for D23. This year's D23 is shaping up to be a solid D23. I do know that Disney want to move away from what they did in 2022, which is very underwhelming, and they know there's a lot of pessimism and skepticism within the community about this, and they want to knock this one out of the park, and they're going to announce things that they're going to build. So stay tuned for all of this. It's going to be very interesting. D23 in August. I'll be covering it all here on the channel, so subscribe down below, hit the notification bell, and tune into all of the coverage on the channel in August. But now it's over to you, the Waltineers. I would like to know, what are your thoughts and opinions on everything you've heard today in terms of these predictions, and also what would you like to see in terms of these predictions or to be announced at D23 this year? What would you really like to see, not just from the predictions I've mentioned, but mentioning something else if you want for these predictions as well. And also I'd like to give a massive thank you to the official Waltineer Club over on Patreon, who always support this channel, and I greatly appreciate it. And a massive shout out to the official Waltineer Gold members that you can see here on the screen, along with Waltineer Diamond member Kyle Mahan. And with that being said for today, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.